Boxing Silent listeners, on the panel with me today I've got Kurt Ward, Tommy Allen, Alex Morris and Adam Smith. I'm your host Andy Patterson, and with us on the phone is boxing promoter Eddie Hearn. Eddie, firstly, it would be remiss of us not to thank you for accepting...
Did you say you've got Adam Smith on?
Adam Smith, not from Sky,
no. Not the Adam Smith, no.
I'm gutted. I thought I'd have an ally.
You have got an ally. I'm a matchroom.
Adam Smith's a matchroom guy.
First of all, Eddie, thanks for the official request anyway for interview. As you know, if you either know or you don't know, we're a hardcore group of boxing fans, so the main people who will be listening to this is hardcore boxing fans. You're well aware that the hardcore group are not happy about this pay-per-view card on the 22nd of November. We're not going to discuss exclusively about the pay-per-view, obviously. We want to discuss some other things as well, but the starting point is about the pay-per-view, obviously. First question off the bat is, whose decision was it? Was it yourselves? Was it Sky's decision to make this a pay-per-view card?
I guess it's a joint decision. Of course, they're the broadcaster. They've got to accept, the card that's put in front of them as a pay-per-view. Just to give you a little bit of background, December 6th was originally our pay-per-view date, with Brooke going to defend his IBF world title, Bellew against Cleverly as sort of co-main event, or chief support, whatever you want to call it, and a couple of other matchroom boys. Obviously, with Brooke getting injured, the slot was still there for a pay-per-view event, and, Sky came to us and said, what have you got? And I said, look, I can build something around Bellew Cleverly, and, we've got Rigondeaux, we've got Groves looking to get out. I know Quigg wants to defend his world title. McDonald's going to defend his world title. Can put Callum Smith in the big fight. Joshua's, and it snowballed from there, really. And, we're in a position now where most are happy, other than, we say this hardcore audience that we talk about. And when we talk about hardcore audience, I don't mean to be derogatory to hardcore audience, because they're important. And we always have a laugh and a joke about hardcore and casuals. But, the opportunity was there to put on a pay-per-view show. We had a lot of fighters that wanted to get out. And, I know the argument about, I had a Bruce interview recently about, they're all sort of main event fights. You could have done them all individually on Saturday night fight nights. Well, yeah, but over, 6-7 weeks, or possibly more with the splits, and that wasn't possible. We had the opportunity to get people out in big fights or important fights for them, and that's the route we chose to take.
Eddie, can you explain to us exactly how this pay-per-view came about? Did you go to Sky with these names and say, we should put this on pay-per-view? Did you sit down with them, talk about it? Did they say they wanted pay-per-view? Can you just clarify that for us, please?
It's difficult to clarify, but the original card on December 6th was due to be pay-per-view, and when Bell injured, we looked at other options, and during that time, Groves there decided that he wanted to fight again. Gale decided that he didn't want to wait for Froch, he wanted to fight again. Quigg got rid of Jamoy quite quickly, and he was available to fight again. So it just sort of snowballed from there, really. I mean, Groves did big numbers in the last Brass fight, and, he's an important part of Sky's makeup moving forward. And I think the addition of DeGale and Groves, and the two title fights of Quigg and McDonald, made Sky comfortable that this was, and I'm not saying that Bellew Cleverly is a pay-per-view fight. I've been there a million times. I think it's a great fight. I think it's going to be a brilliant fight. But, we built a card, presented it to Sky, and they were happy to proceed as a pay-per-view event.
Okay. So, as obviously the head of boxing, or Adam Smith at Sky, he said a few years ago, or 18 months ago, that he wanted more 50-50 fights. The betting odds, Eddie, doesn't suggest that these are 50-50 fights apart from the main event.
Well, I think one thing is quite important, I was talking to my old man about actually last night over a few fireworks, is that the odds are quite interesting in boxing, because if you analyse the fights individually, some of the odds are quite strange, because, and we were talking actually about the Matthew Macklin fight against Highland next Saturday, that's a really, really tough and close fight. If you look at Macklin's last performance against Yevers, I'm sorry to drift off the 29th, but I want to talk more widely about it, 22nd, I want to talk more widely about it. Matthew Macklin is 16-1 on to beat Jorge Sebastian Highland. That's just not right, in my opinion. In my opinion, and you'll see next Saturday if I'm right or wrong, that fight's more like 60-40. To be honest with you, Callum Smith against Nikolai Sezloka, I think goes down in the same boat. But sometimes books that want to tempt you in with a 2-to-1 on or 3-to-1 on or 7-to-4 on, because I just don't want to take bets on it. So I wouldn't look too closely at the odds of the fights individually. If you want me to break them down, I will. I think Galley against Perez is a very underrated fight. Go on.
Have you actually had a look at Callum Smith's opponent, Eddie?
Absolutely. I was there, ringside. I was in the front row, mate, when he boxed Sakio Bika at Atlantic City on the Reef. Yeah, and
he hardly threw a punch that night, Eddie.
Well, he took a little bit of a pasting, but he came. He's a big, strong man. And if you look at Callum Smith, take the hype away. The kid's 13-0. Tell me Callum Smith's best win today.
Yeah. I agree with Callum Smith Callum's a top prospect, but this is a good step up for him. But it's not a 50-50 fight, Eddie. This is not a 50-50.
It wouldn't happen just now, mate.
I think it's like 60-40 fight. But you'll see on the night. Sometimes, if you want to, and it's our job to hype Callum Smith up, and by the way, I think he's going to be a fantastic fighter. Yeah. He's never been in with anyone like Nikolai Fishlocker. So the proof will be in the pudding. And what do you see Callum Smith doing in that fight?
I see him stopping him to the body within 6 rounds. Because if you look at the Abraham fight...
That would be an incredible statement.
It would be, but at the same time, if you look at the Abraham fight now, in my opinion, Abraham is not the same fighter, never was the same fighter at super middleweight that he was at middleweight. He is shot, in my opinion, and all that fella did was land 3-punch combination and had to reset himself because he couldn't get an uppercut in. Abraham never worked the body. All he did was just keep the high hands, as he always does, throws his silly little flurries, but never once worked the body, and Callum Smith will find that left hook to that body. I'll be honest.
As his promoter, I'll be honest. It's a good fight, but as his promoter, I'll be honest with you. I'm concerned about that fight because I don't think Callum's fought anyone as tough as him. I know the camp, these Montenegros, they've got some absolute lunatic manager with long hair. You'll see him jumping around. It's the same lot as Latican, who fought Burns. This is a massive fight for them. Trust me, they're here to win. And he's 13-0, Callum Smith. You know, his best win other than Biose was probably Mendes. Mm-hmm. Right? So he's not been anywhere near this one.
I was just going to ask, actually, just to go back to a comment or a couple of lines that you mentioned in an interview previously about this card. You said it was 6 hours of championship boxing with some of Britain's best fighters and big fights. But to be truthful, Eddie, there's not a meaningful title on the line in any of these fights, and none of them are really big fights if you take away the main event. If you're being truthful about it, you know, because you also said as well is that pay-per-view should only be used for something special like Pacquiao, Mayweather, Klitschko. You know, to be honest, Eddie, these are showcase fights you're putting on. Kessler, you know, these are showcase fights at the end of the day, isn't it?
I don't agree with that. I think the Gal against Caravan is a great fight. Personally, I think if the showcase card fights on the bill, Groves against Dublin, I have to agree with you. I mean, although the kid would have a crack and he will come to win, and Groves looked very average against Rebress, who I don't think is much at all.
Were you not calling Dolan a potential banana skin fight for Groves though earlier this week?
Yeah, because you know why? Because he'll have a go, and I think Groves is chinny.
Well, of course he's going to have a go though.
A non-puncher. Yeah, but I'm not lining that fight up as a 50-50 great. I'm saying what it is. It's great to add George Groves to the bill as a showcase. Good word. He is going to bring in a lot of casuals who like to see him fight. He was involved in a tough fight before, and I expect him to stop Dudley.
But why is that of interest to us though? You know, you mentioned the casuals and stuff, but at the moment you're selling it to us, the hardcore fans.
No, your audience. I have to cater for all kinds of different people. Okay? If it's a choice of getting George Groves on in a fight that might be half a ding-dong, but he'll probably knock the other guy out, know your audience. People like to see that. People want to see George Groves in action. Totally understand what you want. And the difference is, and this is when you talk about, you know, trade fights, and I had the opportunity to probably make 1 or 2 50-50s in fights that I think you would have been quite happy with, but actually wouldn't have added any buys or interest to the show. That's the difference. When I had George Groves, you know, the argument even about, I mean, it's funny, but like Audley Harrison, you know, I mean, it's like, these are guys who are going to create column inches. I'm going to do a media lunch. We're going to get every sports writer from the land at the media lunch writing about these guys, versus a trade fight for the British title that actually is getting no traction whatsoever. Do you understand? So I have to know my audience, and I think I'm quite good at that. And I can't keep everyone happy in every single fight. And a classic example is sometimes you can put a card on that you guys are actually quite pleased with, yet it doesn't rate at all.
Yeah.
I've done it on quite a few times. Every time I've done a trade card, because I think that's an odd word as well, the ratings have been really poor, but the fights, they've been very enjoyable. But then you put a fight on where, and again, sometimes we're a little bit limited, on our Saturday night fight nights because we have a standard rights fee. And sometimes if you've got a big name fighter, actually, Groves Rebrass is quite a good example because I didn't think that was going to be much of a fight at all.
Yeah, but did you ever see Rebrass though? Did you ever see Rebrass fight before?
Yeah, I've seen him before. Yeah.
Right, you would know. He's a tough fighter.
You do know that I study boxing every single night, don't you? Probably since the age of about 9. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not just some toff that's just turned up and gone, I'd have a little crack at the old boxing. I've studied boxing my entire life. I've been in gym since I was 8 years old. I'm not telling you I'm an expert, but I watch all these fighters from every single division.
If that's right, Eddie, then why are you telling us some of these fights are 50-50 when they clearly are not 50-50 fights?
I'm telling you, that Callum Smith against Serge Locker, in my opinion, is, 60-40 fight.
60-40.
I think the guy against
you said to Quigg and Cassius on Monday it was 50-50.
Well, I mean, I believe Callum Smith can lose that fight. And it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world if he lost that fight.
It would.
Over 12 rounds.
It would be a massive shock if he lost
to
that guy.
It would be a
massive shock. But as I say, Smith's 1-10 on, Skloka is 13-2.
Well then maybe you have a few quid on Serge Locker.
Nah, no chance.
But I'm telling you now, those odds aren't right in that fight. But you have to understand the bookmakers as well. They also don't want to lay off. They don't want to give you a shot of Callum Smith at 3-1 on.
Right.
Adam, they just don't do it.
Yeah, Adam's the resident bookie. Adam, you want to come in here, mate, and explain these odds to Eddie?
I do kind of get the point about giving Callum Smith at 3-1 on, but when it's, to be fair, the odds obviously they don't very often get them wrong, and really at the end of the day they don't take all that much money on boxing anyway, so they do play it safe sometimes, but like I say, they don't very often get it wrong. So I mean, we've been over Groves. I was just gonna look into McDonald, Eddie, since he's been with you. Is the odds of his fights? Inom was 1-40 to beat Inom in his first fight under you guys. So he fought a career line
in the 6th rounder.
Yeah, that's fine. And then he went over to Medina, who was 1-66, and then Rachawat.
He nearly lost that fight actually. Did you watch that fight?
Yeah, it was a decent scrap. Yeah,
he was getting battered to the body. Yeah, I was quite concerned.
And then we went on to. And then the Rachawat one was one for me. I know they get some padded records out in Thailand, but the combined record of his last 3 opponents going into that was 12-28, with 6 draws. One of which of those 3 was a debutant. So I thought that was pushing it a little bit. I know they're in the rebuilding stage, but McDonald was coming off a great performance to get over Siege. I know he had a bit of problems.
But can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
You're talking about you're talking about a very isolated case there of a kid who got stripped for his IBF title, who actually was in a promotional managerial dispute, who didn't know whether he was boxing, probably up until about 3 or 4 days before the event. One of those guys in particular, I think, was drafted in a week before. And to be honest, those fights were just about getting him out. And his head was in such a state that it wasn't really about bringing him in an opponent that was going to give him a tough fight. And to be honest with you, that showed against Medina, because Medina was supposed to be quite a routine night. And after about 5 rounds, I was quite concerned, because it was turning into half a war. And he was expected to win that fight quite comfortably.
But surely you don't deserve credit for that, though. As you just said, that you weren't expecting that. You didn't put that fight on expecting it to be a good clash for McDonald.
I put that fight on to give Jamie McDonald rounds and to gear him up and trying to get his head straight and get him back into some kind of routine, because his head was up his arse and he needed to be active and he needed to know when he was fighting. I wasn't particularly comfortable at that stage in putting him in a proper fight, to be honest with you.
See this card, Eddie. How many fights on it would you say are competitive fights?
I would say, of course, Bellew Cleverly is a wonderful fight. The Gal Paraban.
Right.
And people talk about the Gal. Tell me someone who the Gal thought was better than Paraban.
I'd say Brandon Gonzalez is.
Yeah, I'd say.
They're absolute rubbish.
They're maybe about the same level. They're maybe
rubbish.
They're probably around the same level.
You'll see. Paraban would spank Gonzalez.
He might catch him there, but Paraban has 6 good rounds in him, and then he falls to bits. I've watched him on a number of occasions.
It proves it. I don't think Gonzalez has got many. Gonzalez was very disappointing. He got himself in a lucky position to be a final eliminator, Gonzalez. Paraban is a tougher fight, in my opinion.
I wouldn't say there's much between them. I wouldn't say there's much between the level there.
I'm telling you now, Paraban would beat, that's my view, Paraban would beat Gonzalez.
He could beat him, but I wouldn't say there was much difference between the level of them.
Okay, well, still, that's a very competitive fight.
Yeah.
Then, we don't know too much about the Jap, other than he's decent, he's ranked quite highly. Well,
based on what is he's decent?
He's never been in a 12-rounder.
He's 33 years old. He's 33 years old. Never been in a 12-rounder. He's semi-retired. He's had, as I say, he's untested. He's an unknown quantity. Now we speak to the gentleman in Japan called Asian Boxing. He will tell you himself.
Is this the same guy that said Ataki definitely not taking the fight against Quigg? I'm telling you, you heard it here first. That fight's not happening. Is that it?
No, that was Shingo Wake.
AsianBoxing.com. No. That was Ataki.
Otaki, what did he say about Otaki?
Trust me. He said, they're talking about Otaki, I've spoken to his camp, that fight's not happening, he's not fighting Scott Quigg, blah, 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 blah. I read all this stuff, as I do for everybody. And originally, Shingo Wake was the opponent. Then he come out and said, there's no way Shingo Wake is injured, blah, 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 blah. I said, listen, we get an email from his promoter, Shingo Wake has suffered an ankle injury during road work this morning, he's no longer available for a fight. I went back probably 12, 30 minutes later. Does any extra money make his ankle feel better? I'm sorry, the incident is too severe, he will not be able to have a copper can. Boom. That's it. So we look around, go through the world rankings. Ataki is number 3 in the IBF, he's 9 in the WBO, he's up there 7 on BoxRec, 8 on BoxRec, which means very little, but does actually sometimes people use it.
Box rate rankings aren't all that.
Hold on a minute. But listen, you use box rec rankings when it suits you.
No, I don't.
Nobody on boxing uses those rankings. We have our own ranking system, and when we quote rankings, we quote Ring Magazine's rankings, usually, because they're done by a host of writers, and it's done by a lot of them, and they tabulate the scores.
Well, alright, he's 13 on Fight News, whatever. But the bottom line is, you can analyse every opponent. We'll beg to differ. The proof will be in the pudding. If he turns around and Scott Quigg backers him in a round and he's pony, then you're probably right. But we'll see, won't we?
But
I mean, you could go for each individual fight. I mean, Michael Sprott, don't forget, 2 fights ago, people were going, oh, Michael Sprott, that's a decent fight for AJ. Now,
who's saying that?
He's Banjo Baktov. Loads of people were.
I made a comment after Joshua's debut that it should have been against somebody like Sprott. But that's on his pro debut. Like 30-40 in the world, say Michael Sprott is an Olympic champion, should be debuting against somebody like that. In my opinion.
I don't recall that.
Yeah, in your opinion.
In my opinion.
But again, in your opinion. But then again, on the flip side, you've got to look at what appeals. I'm talking about the man on the street as well. Don't just forget about these people as well. I'm talking about a guy who people know, he's won a couple of prize fighters, people have seen him in action. Most of the people, I thought Dennis Baktov was quite a good choice of opponent, right?
It wasn't at that level, yeah. It wasn't horrible.
No one really, no one's ever heard of Dennis Baktov. So answer this for me. If I would have done Anthony Joshua against Michael Sprott at the O2, I would say we would have improved viewing figures by between 20 and 30%. I would have said that I would have increased gate revenue by 20 or 30%. Why is that? Because he's known. I'm not saying he's Muhammad Ali, but he's known. And sometimes I have to look at the bottom line. I have to look at driving numbers, whether that's viewing figures or whether that's.
But you're playing on public.
Revenue.
Sorry, but you're playing on public ignorance at the moment. You look at Michael Sprott's record.
Really?
The last 6 fights that he's been in have all been prize fighter style fights, and he got knocked spark out by Callum Meehan in his, in the first round in his last fight.
Callum Meehan ain't bad.
He's 44 years old.
He was alright 10 years ago.
But listen, you say that I'm playing on public ignorance. I'm not. I'm just listening to the market. That's all I'm doing. Just listening to the market. And I'm trying to be as honest with you as possible and tell you that sometimes I make decisions that are based around driving numbers. And
pound notes.
Sometimes I'll make a fight. No, but listen, I could make a card, right, that you guys would absolutely love. No one would watch it.
But surely that's your job. Your job is to sell that card.
But what fights would they be, do you think, Eddie?
No.
What fights would they be that we'd love? Could you name them, what you think they would be?
I'm talking, I could make trade fights. I don't know. I mean...
we like competitive fights. It doesn't matter what level it's a British title or an English title.
To be honest with you, right, this is an example, right?
All we want is competitive fights.
Say again?
All we want to see is competitive fights. It doesn't matter what level it's at. Whether it's a British title, a European title, or a world title.
But the thing is, if you look at the fights that we've put on over the last, 12 months, for example, you talk about competitive world quality fights. You go through, Frotch against Groves, 1, right? Frotch against 2, Groves 2. Burns against Crawford, right? Barker against Stern. We all know what happened, but still a big fight. Smith against Abraham. Decent fight.
Stern.
Sorry?
Barker never fought Stern.
Barker fought Stern.
Oh, yeah, he did, but he got knocked out.
Barker didn't fight Stern. Yeah, well done.
Sorry, I was thinking something else.
Brook against Senchenko. Brook against Porter. I don't know, some other ones that might have gone under the radar. Crawler against Murray. Yeah. Reese against Buckland. Selby against Brunker looked like a great fight on paper. Coyle against Brisbane. We're on another level to where we were. And I appreciate we've got plenty of distance still to go and to cover. But sometimes, when I pick up an old program and I look at some of the dross that we put on, and I know I always refer back to these, but this was only sort of 2-3 years ago. We're on another echelon to what we used to do. And I picked up a Sky Sports boxing card the other night, and it was Colin Lyons against Lee Purdy, who's the top of the bill. Right? And Eric Ocheng in an 8-rounder was chief support.
That Purdy fight was a good fight.
Yeah, but do you know how that rated?
No, I enjoyed it.
I mean, but this is what I'm saying. I could make Purdy again, but the viewers don't respond to those fights. And of course, I know we've got to make 4 50-50 fights. We make as many as we can, sometimes not enough. And I think a lot of the criticism we get, and this is something I've been thinking about lately, is these tick-over fights, if you like. Yeah. And this is an area which I think we certainly need to improve on, because it's a little bit of a catch-22. And if I can explain the process to you, and the O2 was a really good example of this. I fought tooth and nail to get Boylan against Goodjohn on TV, right? I thought, this is an English title fight. This is going to be a really good fight. Boylan sold 500 tickets. Goodjohn sold 350 tickets. It's a pure 50-50. When I present that fight to Sky, who else we got? And it's a bit like Leeds the other week. We had Callum Smith on. We had Burns on. Burns was okay because, he was in half decent fight. It was a comeback fight after 2 defeats. But, you've got Callum Smith who all of a sudden gets put in a big fight against Serge Locker. So we ease back. He's got to have an 8-rounder. And it's not really great to watch. And I think that's one of the areas that we've got to up our game. And I think that a good example is Dublin next week, where actually, if you look at the fights, where, Highland against Simpson is a really good fight, right? Spike O'Sullivan against Fitzgerald is a really good fight. There's plenty of that, it means a lot.
There's plenty of action in that fight, I'll give you that one, yeah. There's plenty of action in that one.
I know, but what I'm saying to you is, to the man on the street and to the broadcaster, it's difficult because sometimes the broadcasters, although they're big boxing fans, they're not as hot. And by the way, I would call myself hardcore. I mean, I'm on Box Rec most of the day. I study fights most nights. You know, I've been around. I'm a massive boxing fan. So I know exactly when you put things to me, I do understand what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? But I also have a job to do to deliver numbers and to deliver for another market outside of us, if you like. And sometimes when I go to Sky and say, you know, we've got so and so in another example in Dublin next week. Looks like Croller's going to be on. Right, we've got a big fight planned for him early next year. And I just want to give him 6 rounds, to be honest with you. It's going to be a pretty shit fight. Sky are like, oh, we'll start off with that one. And I'm saying, to be honest with you, let's put that on at 6 o'clock and let's start with Highland against Simpson. But
you just
do most people at home want to watch Crawler, or do they want to, in a 6-rounder that he can't lose, or do they want to watch Highland Simpson?
But that's not of interest to us, what people at home want, but in the casuals one, we've said that you're
Hold
talking
on a minute. Come on, listen, you've got to have a brain. Listen, that's not of interest to you, but that's of interest to the wider market. I can't do both. So I have to try and keep you guys happy, and I have to try and keep these casuals, the bigger percentage of the audience happy. And it's very difficult to do both. Because when I put on, if I did a card of Highland Simpson, Spike against, and then you got like Timms against Sweeney, you know, pretty low grade cruiserweight contest, but a pure 50-50, massive grudge match. If I did those 3 fights, I'll guarantee you'd watch that card and go, that was the bollocks. No one would watch it.
I've got a question for you, Eddie, right? This pay-per-view next week, you say you're a big boxing fan, you've been watching boxing for years. Where would you rank this over the years among Sky pay-per-views? Because personally, and I know the guys on the podcast agree with me, it's got to be the worst alongside David T against Audley Harrison.
No, I totally disagree. I mean, look at the Magnificent Seven card that completely fell apart. Look at some of the calm deals that used to go on. Look at Groves against the Gale. With Cleverly against some pole on the undercard. I mean, do you remember that one?
Mm-hmm. I remember. We're not saying that. We're not saying that those
on
cards.
Another level to that.
We're not saying those cards are great. We're saying that this.
You just said this is the worst. This is the worst. It's nowhere near. It's nowhere near.
Okay, right. So we'll rank those cards. We'll rank those cards down there, Eddie. But this card next week, that is no much better than any other Sky card we've ever had. You know. This just doesn't cut it, Eddie, compared to other pay-per-views that we've had over the years.
That's your opinion, isn't it? But when you say
it's not really my opinion, Eddie, because it's a lot of people's opinion. I tweeted out this and actually made the Independent. The response it got on
your hardcore followers.
He's not got hardcore followers.
I've got 42,000 followers, Eddie. And there was not one person that tweeted me back. Not one person tweeted me back disagreeing that this was a bad pay-per-view card.
But do we not think that the proof will be? But listen, you asked me a question. Yeah. This is the worst pay. It's nowhere near the worst pay-per-view.
Not saying it's the worst.
We're not saying it's the worst, but
along with them.
It's along with them, Eddie, isn't it?
I don't believe so. No.
Well,
I don't think it's anywhere near it.
Okay, a question.
You do remember Groves against the Gale and Cleverly against some pole and Frankie Gavin in a 10-rounder or something. I mean, that was it.
Yeah, they weren't a great pay-per-view.
That was supposed to be Cleverly fighting for the world title against Jürgen Bremer. Bremer pulled out, and that's when the pay-per-view card should have been pulled. A bit like what people are saying with this one, when Cal Brook couldn't go ahead with the fight. Maybe this should have been. Maybe this should have been like lower. This is what people are saying.
It's 2 different cards. It's 2 different cards. That's not one should have been pulled. That was December 6th, Cal Brook. This is another card completely, and that card wouldn't have had anywhere near these amount of fights. I mean. But again, we'll get to this. In terms of where this rates, if you list them all, I don't know, middle to lower end in terms of quality, I would say.
Middle to lower end?
Yeah, because you're comparing them. If you ask me, like, Froch against Groves at Wembley, Froch Groves 2, Froch Groves 1.
Froch Groves 1 was not a good fight, was not a good card. Let's have that right. Froch was supposed to absolutely destroy Groves, and the undercard itself was absolutely awful.
I thought the undercard was poor on that occasion.
Wait a minute. Scotty Cardle fought that guy Zott, who's been recycled by yourself, Eddie, and Frank Warren more times than I recycle milk cartons.
Didn't he fight Smith the other week?
You know but that wasn't even on the pay-per-view card.
Just saying that if anybody's paying to go and watch that.
As it happens, to be honest with you, we had a little bit of bad luck with that card, but again, it was one of the top fights of the year. It did massive numbers and turned out all right. Foxgrove 2, massive, absolutely massive, huge numbers. It's broke nearly every record at Sky.
See, since then, Eddie, can I ask? See, since that Wembley card now, I got this sent in to me by one of our listeners, and actually quite interesting. He says, you did say that after that Wembley card, the profits for the pay-per-view were going to be reinvested back into regular Sky shows.
Who said that? Who said that?
Apparently you said that. Or apparently maybe Sky said that.
I didn't say that.
I've been sent this anyway.
No one's ever said that.
But anyway, well, okay, if it's not getting... See, since that Wembley card, there's only been one British title fight that's taken place on a Sky Sports card since then, and only of the 33 live fights shown since then, 17 had odds where the opponent was less than 10 to 1 underdog.
Yeah, well, let's look at... That was pretty much the last... So what have we had since then? We had the show in Liverpool, where you had Brooke, you had Rocky Fielding against Manny Gonzalez, Smith against Biosay, Bellew and Cleverly out. Then after that you had Burns. Oh, sorry, the week before that you had Burns, who lost. He was top of the bill. He lost. Then you had Curtis Woodhouse, who lost his British title to Willie Limond. And you had Waddy Camacho against Stephen Simmons, which ended up being a pile of shit. Then after that, that's the end of the season. So then we went to Phonesview Arena. You had Joshua against Erich. You had Crawler against Jamoy. Quigg against Jamoy, and you had Crawler against Diaz, which ended up being a damn squid. Purcell against Eggington. Great fight. Then after that, you had George Groves against the Brass. Really good fight. Good numbers on Sky. Then after that, you had Paul Smith against Arthur Abraham. Groves against the Brass was a good fight. You don't think that was a good fight?
He said the card. I think you just said the card there, mate.
Sorry?
Oh, the card was pretty poor.
It was a great... Okay. When you're doing a standard Sky show, sometimes when you've got a name as big as Groves, you ain't got a lot to play with on the undercard. That's the truth of the matter.
Did you want George Groves on this card, Eddie?
Did I what?
Did you want George Groves on the card?
Fucking absolutely. He's going to do big numbers for us.
Okay. I was just wondering.
He seems like
he was the first one. There's two people outside of our stable that I tried to get on the card. One was George Groves, one was David Hay.
But were they afterthoughts?
Two guys who were going to...
Were they afterthoughts? Were Groves and... It seems that way because the backlash that you got from, first of all, announcing the pay-per-view was huge.
Can I just say one thing? As soon as I knew that I was going to sat down with Sky and they said, show me what you can put together, Tally Thouland was probably the third fighter, the third person that I knew that Groves on this card was going to be a win for us. And the other one was David Hay. DeGale decided that he wanted to fight rather than wait. So, and actually, once I had DeGale and Groves, I was reasonably happy, and so was Sky. Because, again, they look at it a little bit differently to you guys. And that's just the truth of the matter.
Well, what was this talk about?
Sorry, continue, Alex.
Sorry, what was this talk about? It was in the Daily Mail, I believe, of Barney Francis apparently putting pressure on you to get Groves or Hay on the card. If apparently you were already planning to get them on there.
I couldn't tell you. I have two beautiful daughters. And although I don't agree with swearing on anyone's life, that couldn't be further than the truth. Barney Francis actually said to me, I would like either DeGale or Groves on this card. That's the exact words. And I'd already announced DeGale, and I still added Groves. That's the truth of the matter. Barney Francis, thankfully, and I get on very well with him, gives me almost carte blanche with the boxing, which is a big responsibility, and we've got another 2.5 years to go, and we'll extend that contract shortly. But Barney would never, ever approach a fighter and try and do a deal to get him on one of our shows. You know, we speak all the time. He's a massive boxing fan. And actually, if it wasn't for him, I think boxing would be off Sky now. because he was under pressure probably 2 years ago just to can it, because it was causing so many headaches. But in answer to your question, George Groves and DeGale, probably my first two priorities, along with David Hay, who, yes, I did ask to go on the card as well.
Eddie, my point on the November the 22nd, was obviously it's full of names on names are on there. All of them, as we've discussed, a lot of them heavily favoured to win. I just thought I know you need pay-per-view for the revenue in terms of that, but I just thought there might be a missed opportunity in that every fighter on there from the main event all the way down the card, Joshua and Smith, they're all, to me, I think they're all in building fights, and all will have bigger fights next year. Groves and DeGale are obviously mandatory. Joshua's building, winner of the main event goes to a world title, etc. McDonald's obviously got unification lined up. Quigg wants a bigger fight. I think there's the gap there for the cap. We keep going on about the casuals. The gap, the jump, the 15 or 16 pound jump they need to take. I think there might be a little bit of an opportunity miss, because they're all building, and this could be a mega card whereby saying, the story ahead of every fight. If our man wins this fight, he's on to a big one next year, and then that's when the pay-per-view comes in. I just think it might have come in a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But to me, I don't really see this as a building. I see this as quite a big fight for Callum Smith. I definitely think that Jamie McDonald, obviously, we've done a great deal with our Heyman for him to fight against Kameda, and I wasn't going to take the toughest fight in the world, although we don't know a lot about Ramos other than the Colombian who can whack a bit, and that's normally about it, what you get from them.
What's the latest in the Kameda fight, Eddie?
Done. Signed.
Good. Signed and sealed. Done.
Signed and sealed. He has to win. He has to win on Saturday. Otherwise, the other kid fights Kameda.
I think that's pretty much guaranteed, Eddie, that he'll win on Saturday.
McDonald said that he's never seen anything of this guy.
Certainly the plan. That's certainly the plan. But yeah, of course. Listen, there's massive fights planned for next year, and some of them are, and are you going to see more of these kind of cards next year? I probably don't think so, to be honest with you. But
pay-per-view,
the opportunity arose. Yeah, not of these kind of. I think you're going to,
a higher caliber fights. A higher caliber.
Yeah, but fewer of them, because you can't. Again. And I won't bore you with the numbers, but there's a lot of money on the line for purses on this card.
Yeah,
we take
what
that.
You can't do.
Yeah, we know that.
Eddie, can I ask a question?
The thing is, just finish one question, one sec. What you can do is you can condense the number of fights into bigger fights, if you like. So, someone said to me, could you have done Bellew against Cleverly and Quigg against Galahad, and then just a couple of different, small bits? The answer is yes, but I don't believe that it would have been as successful.
Eddie, just a quick one before Kurt's really want to ask you a couple of questions about Scott Quigg, but I want to ask you, Sky cancelled pay-per-view after the Hay Klitschko non-fight, basically. Let's just
Harrison.
straight about it. No, was it no Hay Klitschko?
Oh no, it was, yeah.
It was a Hay Klitschko fight, because he basically, honestly, the fight was shit. I was there, I was unimpressed by it, and then they cancelled pay-per-view from then on. I understand you had to have pay-per-view to get Kessler over to meet his quote to fight Froch, but is this now Sky's business model? Are they going to be pushing a pay-per-view twice a year, once a year? What is their plan for the future in regards to pay-per-views?
I think, in all honesty, and I'll always try and be as honest with you as I can, this is probably quite an isolated choice. We had one pay-per-view this year, we had a chance to do what I perceive to be a big show, big names, get a lot of fighters out in big fights, some bigger than others, and the decision was taken to do it. I think moving forward, looking at the fights that are planned for next year, the kind of fights that are going to take place, or the fights that we'd like to take place. And I'm talking about Quigg against Frampton, talking about...
Do you think you should be putting...
Marquez.
Do you think you should be putting your prospects on pay-per-view cards, though? I mean, you've got your Callum Smith and your Joshua on these pay-per-view undercards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do, because I think that it's a huge card. The atmosphere will be absolutely fantastic, and I want to build them. And I want to build them in big fights. They're boxing on a lot of our shows. I mean, Joshua probably boxes on 70 or 80% of our shows at the moment.
But you've also said that you didn't want to limit them. You said he didn't want to. You said after just before the Hay Harrison, or just after the Hay Harrison pay-per-view, that you didn't want to limit your young prospects to pay-per-view because of exposure problems, and you want them to fight more on the wider community, i.e., the Saturday night fight cards. But you're putting them on pay-per-view.
Hold on. But when you look at the numbers that Frochgroves won, Kevlar, Froch, and Frochgroves 2 particularly did, they're smashing the Saturday night figures anyway. So, in an ideal world, of course, the proof will be in the pudding.
Well, have you got a target for the numbers?
The first fight wasn't pay-per-view, so...
No. Say it again?
I'm saying, the first Cleverly Bellew fight on that card wasn't on pay-per-view either, so... All of a sudden, this one seems to be...
It was supposed to be. It was supposed to be.
Yeah, it was in Box Nation, it was free to air.
Yeah, but that was only when they had the...
When the fight was first made, it was on Box Office. Anyway, when the second fight was made, and it actually went ahead, it was free to air on Box Nation.
Yeah.
Watched by about 6,000 people. Anyway, so going back to what you're saying, the plan for pay-per-views moving forward is, I think, because of the fights that are going to get made next year, I don't think you're going to see as many cards like this, or if any cards like this, as pay-per-view.
I think that's really all we want. I think that's really what we want to hear. This is not a good card.
Honestly, it's not a plan to say, let's make. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I started talking about Luke Campbell against Tommy Coyle, people going, "You're not going to do that pay-per-view." Of course, I'm not going to do that pay-per-view.
Yeah.
But listen, when I'm talking about the fights that I hope to make next year, whether it's Brook against Khan, Brook against Marquez, and Frampton against Quigg, Groves will be doing his utmost to get Durrell over here. Joshua against Fury, Joshua against Price, in 8-10 months' time. These are, I think, bigger fights, standout fights, and there will be pay-per-views. Froch Chavez. Because
as you said 10 minutes ago, this is mid to lower past Sky box office cards. Should Matchroom no be aiming for the top? Should Matchroom no be aiming for the top and trying to get the top?
Yeah, no, I agree. Always aim for the top. I'm just being honest with you. It's not Frochgroves 2. It's not Frochgroves. It's in my opinion, it's probably in terms of all the pay-per-views there's been in the past. I would say it's probably a middle, slightly lower in terms of, but it's nowhere near the worst pay. That was your point. That you thought it was the worst or one of them.
I think it's alongside them. Yeah.
Well, listen. I mean, I'll go away and do some research, and I don't think it is. But again, I think that the proof will be in the pudding. And when you talk about numbers, of course, I'm not expecting to do Frochgroves numbers, and we'll see. We'll see what it does. Sky, I think it's going to do quite well. The pre-buys are already encouraging. Not, of course, on a level of Frochgroves 2, but, when they kick their hype machine into gear, which will be from Saturday night, we've got 2 weeks of programming, 2 weeks of action. I think by the time fight night comes around, I'm confident it will do well.
Eddie, you said, you've been around boxing, a long time, and, you're trying to be honest as much as you can. You don't really think Scott Quigg's a world champion, do you?
Yeah, I do, because...
Come on.
Who did he beat?
No. But hold on. There's many ways that you look at it. Is he a world champion?
No.
Yes.
No.
Do you like... Well, no, but we can argue to the ground. In my opinion...
Who did he beat? Who did he beat for the title, Ed? Because he fought Salinas and he drew.
Do you know where the fuck up was? The fuck up was the WBA should never have installed him as the world champion before that fight.
Yeah.
That was not something we requested. They wanted to free up the interim title, right? So effectively, they stripped Quigg, more or less, to free up the interim title, and all of a sudden promoted him to champion. I don't agree with that at all. For me, the Salinas fight was of the right quality to be for a world title. Regular, super, whatever. The problem is, it was a draw. Now, if that was for a vacant title, there would have been an immediate rematch. And I believe he would have beaten him, and then we probably would have been alright. So he definitely suffered off the back of that. Then we get him out quickly in a poor fight against Diego Silva, and that was what it was. It was, 4 weeks after Salinas fight, which was a 12-round tough fight. From there, he had the mandatory against him.
Sorry to interrupt. Did you try and make the Salinas rematch?
No.
Why?
Because he went away. He went completely off the rails. After the first fight, I spoke to a men guy, Ricardo Rizzo, who's got Abril and a few other Cubans, and he went completely off the rails. We weren't going to fight in 4 weeks. That opportunity came out to fight on the Froch Groves bill. I put him on, handpicked the opponent, knocked him out in 3 rounds, whatever it was. Poor opponent, hands up to that. Then he had a mandatory against Semeno, Nohimar Semeno, who, with about 2 weeks ago, decided that he actually doesn't want to go down the visa office and pick up his visa. So we have to go down the list, and at the time, we actually asked Salinas, because he was next in the list, but to be fair to him, it was about 3.5 weeks out. He hadn't even been in training since the Scott Quigg fight, and we get to Munyai, who I think was number 5 or number 6. He was in England, quite happy. He's a kind of pedigree. We've seen him on Sky before. Quigg knocks him out. After that, then we move on to, we go for Mbunda, which was okay-ish. He pulls out, and then we have Jamoy, who again, we've seen over here before. He's a bantamweight, and he destroys him. Again, being honest with you, I'm not over the moon about how Scott Quigg's opponents have worked out, because it has been difficult. And again, I made a comment the other day, people don't want to fight Scott Quigg. Honestly, it's difficult to match him. We've made a few fights that have fallen through. And the other problem you've got is, again, and this goes back to Sky's license fee and also the revenue for the show, it's difficult to make a fight and spend 150, 200,000 to bring over a big, high-quality name. And when you do, like, for instance, what do we do with Scott Quigg after Otaki? Do we put him in with Kiko Martinez?
Well, that's not going to happen because he went down in weight.
You guys are happy with?
It's not going to happen. He went down to bantamweight. Martinez has been confirmed he's moving down in weight.
Okay, well, they've been emailing me every day for the last 2 weeks trying to make a fight. So
what about Leo Santa Cruz? You did say...
The thing with Leo Santa Cruz, it's a classic example. Do you know how frustrating it is? Honestly, Scott Quigg would fly to America and fight Leo Santa Cruz at the drop of a hat. Leo Santa Cruz, if you look at his purses, I think he got $600,000 or $700,000.
$700,000.
Yeah, correct. For fighting,
sparring partner.
About. This guy was, yeah, exactly, right? Now, Scott Quigg against Leo Santa Cruz isn't big enough in the States to headline a Showtime card, right? So, Leo Santa Cruz plods along as chief support. Now, I can tell you that on a standard chief support, you've got your numbers, you've got your budget for kind of what you'd pay for a chief support. And for those guys, it seems to be somewhere around $750,000. So, that's what Leo Santa Cruz is happy to do. If you want to bring Scott Quigg over, you're probably talking about $500,000 or $600,000 for him, plus Sky TV. Then Leo Santa Cruz is going to want 1.5 for that kind of fight. Mm-hmm. The money's not there to make that fight because it's not a headline fight on Showtime. So he would not come here. I would have to offer Leo Santa Cruz probably $2 million. No, maybe even more to come and fight Scott Quigg over here. I believe Frampton offered him probably north of $1 million.
How much would you have to offer Rigondeaux?
Different kettle of fish. And actually,
would
no bullshitting, that's a fight. Do you know what? And again, absolutely no bullshitting with you. We've started talking about that fight because if Scott Quigg can't get Carl Frampton, I sat down with Scott Quigg the other day and said, listen, you do know that you against Rigondeaux probably sells out the MEN, right? You've got this money, that money. Rigondeaux is not on fortunes, and actually, fighting Rigondeaux, you get somewhere around this kind of purse. And his eyebrows sort of shut up, and he said,
Rigondeaux would sell out any arena in the UK, in my opinion.
No, he's
I don't know.
I think you would, because Eddie, you talk about one of the best amateur boxers ever, pound for pound, one of the greatest.
Right now.
Yeah, but
one of the best in the world.
But people don't know. My mate who likes his boxing, who likes to go once or twice a year, I don't think he's ever heard of Rigondeaux. And he certainly hasn't heard of the fact that he was a great amateur.
Well, did he follow the sport closely then?
Sky's hype machine could make that work, though, and this time they'd be truthful in what they were saying about
Rigondeaux.
Rigondeaux.
I agree with you. Listen, it's not ideal, that fight. And for someone whose job it is to advise fighters and try and, move their careers in the right direction, I'm not mad on the Rigondeaux fight because, let's be honest, Scott probably gets beat. But
Eddie, I've tried to...
I did say to him...
Go on.
I did say to him, listen, it's kind of like one of them fights where you get a huge amount of credit, and if you put up a great fight, it actually furthers your career rather than affects it. And he is a fighter, believes that he can beat him. He knows he's not an idiot, Scott Quigg. He knows how difficult the fight is.
Here's the thing, Ed. That obviously, now, you're saying that the Santa Cruz fight, in America it can't be made, and it's obviously Heyman's not going to allow Santa Cruz to come over to the UK. Rigo, until the WBA probably force that mandatory with the unification, the regular title bollocks and the super title, probably not going to happen anytime soon. Frampton, obviously, there's a bit of political beef going on there with, I don't know, the purse split, the venue, all that sort of stuff. Scott Quigg needs a breakout fight. And to be honest, looking at the WBA rankings today, the fight isn't there for him. The lad, he sounds like a nice lad. He comes across as a nice lad. He's dedicated to the sport, but he needs a breakout fight soon because he's just going to keep getting.
Couldn't agree more.
There's nothing for him.
And that's why we're looking at the Rigondeaux fight, because it's not a fight. But it turns around, and look, the Kid Galahad fight, I don't mind the fight. But ultimately, it's not really a fight that really gets his juicy game. Galahad's awkward, ain't a bad fighter, but...
Rigo's a bit more awkward, isn't he?
Who?
Rigondeaux would be a bit more awkward, surely.
Yeah, but it'd also be probably 7-8 times the purse. And again, at least it's a fight that's going to create worldwide interest.
Eddie, just out of interest, have you ever considered Jimmy McDonald against Scott Quigg? Is that a fight you've...
Sorry, mate, I missed that. Have I ever considered...
Have you ever considered making Jimmy McDonald against Scott Quigg at any point?
Yeah.
Just out of interest.
He was massive at bantamweight, so it's a natural move for him.
Yes. It's actually a fight. It's a fight I spoke to both fighters about, probably when Jamie got stripped of his title, and I was finding it really difficult to find a route for him. Mm-hmm. It's a fight that we discussed in great depth. He'd actually sparred with Quigg, I think before the Sejar fight, or something like that. And actually, I just watched Ringside tonight, and they were talking about that fight on there, because Jamie said after he fought Comida, he'd probably move up.
I've not watched
so, yes, I do think I'd have no problem making that fight at all.
Eddie, on Quigg, I've had some stick on here because I've been sticking up for him over the last 18 months to 2 years, and as you say, it sounds like there has been efforts made to make the big fights, but they're just just struggling to get them for political reasons or whatever. But I think everyone's agreed that he does need a breakout fight, and I think he's been a victim really of the title madness. I think he would probably be not respected more, but the situation would be accepted more by if we're calling ourselves hardcore fans if he didn't have the WBA regular. I know it brings money and a bit of prestige, but I think it'd probably be easier for us to swallow.
I didn't get onto WBA and say, listen guys, why don't you put a regular belt together? It came along. And, for someone like Jamie McDonald, who, again, hold my hands up, I was really struggling with a route for Jamie. He got frozen out by the RBS. It was disgraceful, to be honest with you. And I worked closely with them. The WBA came along and said, look, we ranked him highly, the regular belt, and it was an opportunity for him. And look what's come out of it for him. A fight probably in Vegas for, 10 times as much money as his highest purse, probably a little bit less, in what will be called a unification fight, between Comida and McDonald. I think the difference between, I've said this before, and I think it's St. McCougan. For me, of course, you've got the title thing, but it's more about the fights. Mm-hmm. If a fight for a regular title carried the quality, I don't mind it as much. So what I'm trying to get at with that comment is, if Quigg fought Salinas, won, I'm quite happy with him being a world. I believe that's a quality fight, a fight good enough for a world title. Being honest, McDonald against Narachua, probably not.
Mm.
Right? Frotch against Kessler was for the WBA regular belt. Great. But then you've got like Jared
So you're
Fletcher
basically
fighting for the WBA regular. And go on.
Oh, so you're basically saying then that McDonald and Quigg aren't world champions, and you basically admitting that
No, I'm not.
the fights weren't good enough.
No. What I'm saying is they're definitely 100% world champions. It's on the WBA website.
I've viewed Jim McDonald's a world champion.
Let me finish.
Definitely, I don't think Scott Quigg is.
Well,
Roy Jones
all I'm
Jr.
saying
is
to you,
a world champion.
being honest, what I'm saying. Say that again.
Well, Roy Jones Jr. is a world champion. It says it on the WBU website. Where do we stop with this nonsense?
No, but I don't class the WBA. You're talking about a totally different kettle of fish.
Eddie, you've got a super champion, okay, and you've got a regular champion. It's political nonsense, but just a wee bit of fact
you've got
here.
an interim champion.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now go back to last December. I tallied this up. There was 84 titles in circulation as of last December. 33 of them belong to WBA. That's 34% of titles in circulation belong to one organisation.
Well, your stats are unbelievable.
That is all they are, Eddie. I mean, don't quote me. I mean, HBO won't even recognise these guys. In fact, Jim Lampley calls them legalised extortion bodies.
Mm-hmm. Listen, all I can tell you is I'm working 18, 20 hours a day, and I'm making fights as quickly as I can. And if a WBA regular title comes up for a world title, I'm making it. Mm-hmm. And
how do you explain that away to
my fighter? I'm making it.
How do you explain that away to fans, or to the casual fans? Like, say, how do you explain that there's two world champions?
I think, again, it's more about, for me, it's more about the fight that they're into. Like I went back earlier, Daniel Jacobs against Jared Fletcher. That feels like an interim title fight. No, Frotch against Kessler, Quigg against Salinas. They feel like world title fights.
But Quigg didn't win. Quigg didn't win that fight.
Yeah, but you're right. But I can't tell you. But unfortunately, that's not his fault. Mm-hmm. He was happy to go into that fight. That fight was always a vacant title, always. And then 1 week before, actually about 3 days before, Quigg was the world champion. What are you going to do? Sorry, mate. Actually, no. I'm not world champion because
Quigg himself said that he doesn't feel like he'll be a world champion until he wins it in the ring. Beats a decent opponent for it. But then he doesn't, and now he's happy.
What he actually said was, he said that before the Salinas fight.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when they said, right, so you're world champion, he said, well, I don't feel like I'm world champion until I win it till I win it in the ring, i.e., till I beat Salinas. And of course, that was the plan. What the WBA should have done was that title should have been vacant, and they should have rematched for the vacant title. And when he would have beat Salinas the second time round, I think he would have got a lot more credit. I think Scott, who by the way is one of the nicest geezers, and I know some dedicated people, and he's probably the top of that list, is a little bit unlucky because he will fight. He's up for fighting whoever's put in front of him, and he got the draw against Salinas. He was already given the title. And after that fight, it felt weird. We were in the change room. It was like, fuck. It was almost like, you don't, it was like, we want to do it again. Because you want to actually hear and the new and not, and still. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't ideal how that worked out at all.
Eddie, has there ever been any interest from Matchroom in signing Rigondeaux since he left Top Rank?
No, not really. I spoke to Gary Hyde, a long time ago, probably 6 or 7 months ago. I just said, just out of interest, what you doing with Rigondeaux? And he said, we're talking to Golden Boy. He said he was talking to Box Nation and Rock Sports. I think it's before he had talks with Frank. And listen, I'm a big Rigondeaux fan. I think it's great, but I just don't know how I could hit the numbers that he needs. I wouldn't be confident that against an opponent that isn't necessarily of interest to the UK market, that he's going to do the numbers required to hit his guarantees or close to the guarantees that he was on from Top Rank.
What was his guarantee from Top Rank?
don't know. I mean, I think, what was his publicised purse from the last fight? 700, 800,000? Yeah, probably. But, don't forget as well, those published purses, by the way, they're not really, I mean, for an international fighter, they're never really the purses, because all they are is about agreement. So, there'll be a promotional fee paid, there'll be normally international television, not so much so for Rigondeaux, but particularly for a UK fighter, when they're fighting in America, there's a purse on a bout agreement, and then there's the UK revenue as well. So, but I think he was probably looking for between, I don't know, $700 and $1 million per fight. And I wasn't comfortable that I could achieve those numbers, to be honest.
So, if he's looking for $1 million, obviously maybe to fight Quigg, obviously that fight would have to be pay-per-view at some point, wouldn't it? So you're talking...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So
you're talking a stadium fight of some sort.
If Rigondeaux against Quigg was pay-per-view and filled the Indian Arena, then you can easily pay Rigondeaux what he needs, and you can give Quigg a huge payday. And that's the reason it started coming into play.
See, that's a fight I wouldn't mind paying for.
That's
I'm the same. I'm absolutely
pay for that.
I'm the same, because in the day...
Can I just say something to you though, right? The problem is I'm not sure how well that fight would be on pay-per-view, because, to drive pay-per-view, don't forget the commercial buys as well are so important. Yeah. When I say commercial buys, I'm talking about the pubs and the clubs. They're so important to the overall revenue of the pay-per-view. Like Fox Groves, I think, was like the biggest selling pay-per-view to the pubs and clubs, and the more commercial buys than any other pay-per-view. Quigg against Rigondeaux does 0 pub buys. Mm-hmm. Because, like, your man who you walk into the pub and say, do you want Quigg Rigondeaux? He goes, what? Whereas you go into this one and, and say, do you want Bellew Cleverly? Do you want Groves? Do you want DeGale? Do you want Joshua? He goes, oh yeah, have some of that. And they're really important to the overall revenue stream of the pay-per-views. Quigg against Rigondeaux, for me, is a fantastic fight. But I'm not necessarily sure. And the other problem you have with pay-per-view is sometimes a fight is so big that it has to be a standalone. So you've got a budget for the undercard, which can sometimes be limited. And, Frotch is a good example of that now, where, they own the show, the fighters, so they don't want to spend bundles and bundles on the undercard. And Quigg against Rigondeaux, there might not be a lot left for the undercard. Sky might say, Quigg against Rigondeaux, and what else?
What happens?
I'm not sure what kind...
What's going to happen? What happens if the WBA then suddenly, all of a sudden, mandate that fight? Obviously, that agreement would need to be made. Obviously, it goes to mandate. Rigo's going to get the big end of the purse. So, are you going to advise Quigg to basically vacate the title if you can't broker a deal or can't finance it in any sort of way?
No, firstly, they won't do that.
They're making the money off Quigg, no Rigondeaux, aren't
they? Exactly. But that's why they won't do it.
Exactly.
They've actually made a final eliminator between Eskandon and Tyson Cave.
Mm-hmm. So they've also got an interim title as well for the WBO.
Yeah. Say it again.
They've also got an interim title for the WBO because apparently Chris Avalos passed up on the mandatory.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he passed that.
Why was that? Because I think he's one of your fighters now.
No, I'm just advising with Top Rank because one, I know quite a lot about the position he's in, obviously, and two, it's a great play for me in the Frampton Quigg puzzle because I can use it as a pawn to try and make the fight, or I can make the fight myself, potentially even bid for the fight, win a purse, bid for the fight. Just a business move, really, more than anything.
See when it comes to selecting Scott Quigg opponents, does Joe Gallagher have much input, or is it purely Matchroom at the side?
Basically what happens is I will send a list of fighters to Joe Gallagher and Scott Quigg, and they'll decide themselves. I think Joe Gallagher gets a lot of stick for selecting the opponents, but, we'll go away and, I'd give Scott Quigg a list of, 7 or 8 opponents, particularly for when he fought Jamoy.
Yeah.
And, there's all kinds of opponents, Jorge Arca, Terrazas, literally 8 or 9 at get-go.
Apparently Gallagher's saying he's got a king's ransom for Quigg to fight Rigondeaux, is that right? I'm sure he said that.
He's wanting a king's ransom?
Yeah. He said...
Yeah, he's probably get one.
He probably says it's the biggest danger fight available, or out there for Quigg. So
you know what you get paid for that.
If Scott Quigg's going to fight Rigondeaux, he's got to get an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
To do it, because he's putting everything on the line, isn't he? But he's getting to a stage where he appreciates, I appreciate, and Joe appreciates as well. He needs that breakout fight, and we're desperate to try and make it. Desperate. How
realistic is this Frampton fight for happening in 2015, Eddie, in your opinion?
It's 50-50 fair also,
it's very realistic.
It's 50-50 fair and split in that.
Yeah, I believe so. And let me tell you why, because, and I had this conversation with Jake McGuigan and Blaine McGuigan again, probably end up saying things that I shouldn't, because I'm just trying to talk to you like I'm talking to some dude down the pub. That fight, for me, Frampton sells more tickets. Absolutely no doubt about that.
He should get the bigger end
Scott
of the
Quigg, at the moment, because of which broadcaster is with, has significantly higher viewing figures.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not even saying they're massive, because they're not. They're quite average. Right? But obviously Frampton's last fight was, I don't know, Bob said it was seen by 4,000 or 5,000. Who knows? Small. Mm-hmm. But what I'm bringing to the table is Sky and pay-per-view.
The platform, yeah.
And what I'm bringing to the table is what Scott Quigg is bringing to the table. Mm. So without me and without Scott Quigg, Frampton can't get on pay-per-view. Okay? And I don't want to sound like Billy Big Bollocks, but I'm just telling you the facts here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, they're both world champions. We've got the argument, is Scott Quigg world champion? Frampton definitely beat Martinez, definitely world champion. But the fact is, they're both world champions. Now, whether you argue it should be 64, 55, 45, who gives a fuck? Mm-hmm. Like, Tyson Fury boxed David Hay, it was a 50-50 split. Mm-hmm. How on earth is that fight a 50-50 split? The answer is, they needed each other to make the fight.
Correct.
This is a fight where neither fighter will see this kind of money.
Correct.
So
I've always used that argument. I've always used that argument to Mayweather and Pacquiao as well. They need each other. It's 50-50 in the middle, Yeah,
I think I agree with that probably a few years ago. I'm not sure I agree with it now.
Well, yeah, a few back, yeah. I don't want to see it now.
But listen, the splits, I deal with splits all the time. And you're dealing with egos. I mean, I deal with Frotch Groves, Terry, murder. But you get to a stage, and then you're arguing over like 2.5%. And it's like, are you fucking mad?
Exactly.
Let's make this fight. Everyone wants to see it. Let's sell out the MEN, or let's go to Belfast and sell out a fucking football stadium. Let's do loads of buys on both. And you two can make millions.
Mm-hmm. The thing is,
and then you've got like...
Sorry, on you go. Finish off. I was going to ask you another question, but
the thing is what?
I was just going to ask you said, for instance, you have got the platform, and Quigg's on that platform. Frampton can't go on pay-per-view because he's not either with your stable or with Sky, etc. But surely if Sky have got an interest in George Groves with another promoter, and Sky really want that Quigg fight, surely they're going to work with Barry and bring Frampton across to put that fight on pay-per-view. Surely that can be done.
It all comes through me. Mm-hmm. I'm the exclusive promoter on Sky Sports.
Right. So what does Barry say to that now? Does Barry not want to work with you to make that fight?
I've no idea. I spoke to Barry Wigan. I spoke to his sons, who I don't think I'm Barry's favourite person. But and again, I'm not saying if you want to get on Sky, but I'm Sky's promoter.
Yeah.
And
you have
the answer is, can George Groves get on Sky Sports on pay-per-view? Absolutely, with me involved.
Mm-hmm. You met the Sutherlands for lunch today, Eddie. You met the Sutherlands for lunch today.
Yeah, I'm very close with Callum. Yeah. I'm very close.
Can you let us know some ins and outs of what you talked about and maybe some potential fights? Or if you did discuss some...
Smith Abraham too.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Joshua against Price.
Yeah.
Good fight.
And I'm talking about, obviously, Groves and Durrell. That'll go to bids in December. Mm-hmm. Can we get it on Sky? Can we get that fight over here?
Would you be willing to put all those fights on the same card? Or would they be different?
Darrell won't travel.
Yeah, I don't think, because of the timing wise, I don't think it'll work out like that. I think Smith will fight Abraham in February.
Price would have been good
for me, that's not a fight. Yeah. Well, what do you mean, Price as an individual?
Well, Price fighting Joshua on the 22nd would have been better than the Sprott fight.
For me, I still think Joshua's got learning to do before that fight. I believe he wins now, but it's not really the time that I'd put him in that fight. I want to make that fight end of the summer.
When would you put him in with Tyson Fury?
End of summer, end of the year.
Summer? Okay.
Something like that. I want him to have another, he's going to fight Sprott, then he'll fight at the O2 on October the 31st.
So Kevin Johnson?
He'll probably box. Possibly, yeah. I like that fight. Because...
Should take him rounds.
He'll take him round. I'm not saying that Johnson's like the greatest thing in the world to watch, but in the build-up, he's quite funny. He looks the part, he's experienced.
Can I offer
and of course,
two?
From a selling point.
Can I offer two opponents, Eddie? Just to look at, obviously, guys maybe to take him rounds. Sherman Williams and Dominic Gwynn.
Yeah, I feel like Sherman Williams is really shot and fat and old, because I was going to get him in prize fight and I had a look at him and he just looked he looked like a mess.
Careful, Sherman's a friend of the show.
You've got James Tony.
I mean, I think that James Tony, it's a bit different. James Tony's a little bit different to Sherman and Tank Williams.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's not so much a tank now, it's something like a blancmange. But I mean, the thing is that we get a lot. I want Joshua to fight bigger guys, because, like Backtoff, don't get me wrong, was like 6'2", or 6'1", but Joshua is such a massive guy. Huh?
Marius Wack, he went the distance with Klitschko.
Yeah, not bad, yeah.
Good chin.
He's got a jaw, man.
He's got a jaw on him.
Christian Hamer. Christian
Hamer.
The fight I really like. Yeah, the fight I really like is Manuel Charr.
Nah, I don't rate that guy at all. I
like that fight.
Manuel Charr,
exactly.
he played a part, but did you see the Klitschko fight?
Yeah, exactly. Listen, he looks fantastic.
He'll sell the fight.
Yeah, but he's not a mud. Look, I know we all fight this guy through the roof, and I honestly believe he's going to be the future heavyweight champion of the world. He only had 9 fights. He had 44 amateur fights.
You just don't know a heavyweight until they're 10 rounds, until they're hitting the chin,
I'm sure he's got... I'm confident he's got a great chin, but he's still got to be... I think we've got something really special here, and I've got to do it in the right way.
Do you think your old man went slightly over the top? Eddie, do you think your old man went slightly over the top with his article recently when he says... Did you remember seeing that article about Joshua?
I saw it. I mean, he watches Joshua most days in training. He's like, he's his biggest fan.
It's a bit overkill, wasn't it?
Just watching him. Yeah, but he's a salesman.
Yeah, true.
Hey, Eddie, talking about
promoters of all time, so I can't really knock him.
Talking about your dad's favourite fighters, I saw Proxer's in action over in Poland this week. I know he was a big fan of Proxer.
Super G.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. He thought Proxer was going to beat Golovkin. I told him he was going to get tanked.
He went over.
He said to me, I'm telling you. I'm telling you now, because we got. I can't remember when it was with Darren Barker. I think it was like just before the Proxer fight. I got a phone call saying that we'd like to offer you the fight for the WBA world title against this guy Golovkin. And this was before he was really known. And they said, all we need is, we'll come to London, we just need Kazakh TV and 10 ringside tickets. And that was it. I phoned up Tony Sims, I went, Tony, I said, I've got Darren a world title fight. He said, who's it against? I went, Golovkin? He went, fuck off. And that was it, straight away. And then I started doing my research, and then I went on and watched him knock out Butte in the amateurs, and, I thought, so I started watching, and I told my old man, Tim Proxer's, and he's got no chance. But I've tried to make Proxer against Ryder for January the 31st. But I think they want to just get him through this fight first and see how he looks. But Ryder's another one that I'm really, I'm ready to throw in the deep end, and Tony Sims is, been training for the last couple of fights. He's ready as well. to really sling him in the biggest fights possible. You know, he's supposed to fight Kamitsky, and that was a
Eddie, what about the EastEnders stars? Are they getting any tickets for the pay-per-view on the 22nd, like they did for Wembley? Well, I mean, listen, there was 30 odd tickets handed out for that show, mate. Some of the fans were slightly pissed off at that.
Listen, I wish I had another 10,000 tickets. That's what I wish. But listen, on things like that, it's quite straightforward. And again, Sky get an allocation of tickets, and they'll give them to whoever they want to. Mainly any celeb they feel will bring value. A lot of the other guys, and like, listen, just an example, Mark Wright, okay, right, Essex boy, I know him. He wants to come with Michelle Keegan. Now he's got, I don't know,
yes, please,
4 or 5 million Twitter followers. So I say to him, Mark, you can have these tickets, no problem. But you've got to tweet about the show for me, you've got to tweet the pay-per-view details, pay-per-view number. Yeah, no problem. So he sends it out to her. For me, that's value. You know, I understand people like going, Brian King, I'll fucking tell it, but, you know, it's just another form of marketing. You understand what I'm saying? So, I can understand people going, what the fuck are you doing now? But there's always a method to the madness.
Eddie, on Tony Sims, you know, if there's any new signings, especially down in the south, did you steer him in the direction of his new gym, you know, because it's closely linked to Matchroom, or do you stay out of that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us fucking tweets lately, people going, I suppose you go with Tony Sims or OFC, then it's not like that at all. Tony Sims, in my opinion, is a top trainer and a top man and a very good advisor as well. He's seen it all. If you're down south, who else are you going to go with? You know, Jimmy Tibbs, another great trainer. He's really a Warren man. You know, but the signings that we've got, 1 or 2 that are coming up in the next probably 4 or 5 days to announce. One's up north and the other one's in London, but won't be with Tony Sims.
Could you give us an exclusive of one of them?
Give us an exclusive. I think one's pretty obvious who we're signing, and there's another one who is a young guy turning over. There'll be more on the way.
Eddie, just as I said, we've had you on for about 1.5 hours, so we just want to finish off with some Twitter questions. The first one is actually, it's regards to the Fight Pass. Now, one person has approached me saying he spent thousands of pounds in order to attend many previous Matchroom shows, and he feels a wee bit insulted to be told he has to prove his loyalty by paying out extra just to be able to get his hands on future tickets. So how do you respond to that? And he's not interested about live fight streams, he's only interested about the ticket sides.
Sure. I mean, my response to that is it's not just priority tickets, that's just one benefit of being a Fight Pass member. You do get 10 live stream shows, and the argument is, yeah, but I could watch a couple of them on YouTube and stuff like that. You get other video content, you even get Dopey Bollocks, Kugan Cassis's show, you even get a t-shirt. I mean, I know t-shirts, but it is £29.95. And it is a way of getting your tickets for general sale. So, personally, I think for the money, it's decent value. But it's not just a service to make sure you get priority booking, because I think that's...
But see, at the end of the day as well, I mean, the Steve Goodwin shows that were getting shown on Fight Pass, we were getting them for free on YouTube anyway, so...
And the Coldwell shows.
And the Coldwell shows.
I don't think they're very good quality, to be honest with you. I think our production's slightly different, but, you know, again, we're putting together more shows, and in time, model is there to be a feeder for fighters. So, you know, these fights that we're putting on actually don't mean a row of beans, where people, that is stick over fight. I want to use those bills to put those fights on. For example, I'm talking about Murray putting Kevin Mitchell on the one in London, getting out in a 6-rounder, you know? So, rather than putting that as a televised fight.
Next question is boxing ever likely to return to the red button?
Do you know what? It's quite frustrating, because I really like the red button, and it just wasn't working. The numbers just weren't, you know, I really pushed Sky to do it, and they liked it, you know, they enjoyed it, but the response just wasn't, you know, it's like, I get hounded by people on Twitter saying, oh, why isn't it on the red button? And the honest answer is, because it wasn't in the numbers, and it wasn't warranting the extra cost that was associated with it in return for the amount of people that were using it.
Next one, how many, you getting any extra dates off Sky for next year? Any more dates? Or you've got 22, I believe, a year. Are you going to get any more on that?
Yeah. I don't think we really need any more dates, to be honest with you. I think if anything, the answer might be to consolidate the dates and to put more budgets into each individual date. I think if we can create bigger cards that do maybe 3 or 4 less shows, I think that might be the answer, because the amount of fighters that we've got at the moment, the amount of fighters we've got to get out, fight fees, it's very difficult to put on these fights that, I know you guys want to see, not on pay-per-view. So I think every now and again it might be worth consolidating a couple of dates into one show, a super show, if you like. It's not really something we've done before, but it is something that we're discussing, because you get on a run. Like if you look at, we did September the 13th in Manchester, September the 20th was Grove, September the 27th was Abraham Smith, October the 4th was Leeds, October the 11th was the O2, and October the 25th was Hull. There's a lot of shows, like all virtually back to back. I think the answer to maybe do one show is 2. We'll put all the rights fees in and just make it a bigger card.
Sounds good to me.
Is good or bad for boxing? Is Box Nation good for the sport?
They're definitely good. If someone said to me the other day, "Oh, what do you think about Channel 5 coming in?" I said, "Yeah, fucking great. I want competition is what drives you. If everyone just retired and just gave up, my quality would probably go down, because it's just it's natural instinct, isn't it, to fight for what you got and to try and be the best. I want Box Nation to succeed. I don't believe the numbers show it's not really working.
It appears that you're sort of monopolising the sport, though.
Say that again?
In a sense, you're almost monopolising the sport. You're taking away the best prospects and the best fighters from certain promoters and certain managers.
Do you know, excuse my French, that is the biggest load of bollocks. How are you monopolising the sport because you're being successful, you're being the best? You can't turn around and go, you know what, everyone wants to be with me, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to monopolise the sport. All I want to be is number one. If you call that monopolising the sport, I
it is.
It's just...
How can you say you want competition, but how can you...
Because fight for it. Fight me for it. Don't roll over and lose, and people aren't. That's why boxing's getting better. Because people are trying to compete with me. And all the other guys are getting together, trying to take me on. Wonderful. It will spur me on to do more. But don't worry about monopoly. Monopoly, when you're the best, and you've got control of the market, all of a sudden, you're a monopoly. But that's what you set out to do. I don't set out to ruin people, just set out to be number one. We are at the moment. We may not be in 2 years. We may not even be here in 5 years or 10 years. Who knows? But, market leaders fluctuate and change. It's boxing. At the moment, we've got the best stable. In 2 years' time, fucking Al Heyman might turn up tomorrow and buy everybody.
Did you ever see you and Frank Warren ever sitting down to discuss making potential fights, or is there too much beef between you?
You know what, to be honest with you, I've never spoke to Frank, and I don't lose a minute of sleep over him, but they cannot stand me, that lot. They cannot stand me. And all I ever hear is people telling me, they don't stop slagging you off and on. I don't really, listen, it's quite straightforward, isn't it? I want my best fighters to be on Sky.
Yeah.
He wants his best fighters to be on Box Nation.
Yeah.
So, until there's a perfect scenario, then that's how it's going to be.
Eddie, just going back to Channel 5. Sorry. Just going back to Channel 5. I just wondered if you've got any insight on the Tyson Fury situation. Obviously, their biggest star, or Mick Hennessy's and Channel 5's biggest star, did big numbers in Chisora 1, and then they've let him swan off to Box Nation, where the audience will be vastly reduced.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know too much about that. I mean, the numbers have diminished quite badly on Channel 5. They're still really good because it's a terrestrial channel. But you're talking about, I think the one at the Murray fight did it was like 400,000 or 500,000 average in a 800 or 900 peak, which is still really good. But James DeGale was doing 1.6, 1.7 And Tyson Fury, quite right for the Chisora fight, I think he did like 3 million peak. Something like that, which is great. But,
Eddie, do
you know,
you
with all due
subscribe to the
respect
channel?
to Ryan Murray and... What do you want?
Do you subscribe to Box Nation?
No.
No.
No. Not because it's Frank Warren, just because I spend my life running my own shows and I just don't have time. And I'm on the road non-stop, and any time I get home, I try and spend it with my kids. And I'm not really someone that's going to sit up, you know, till 3 or 4 in the morning to watching internet. I think the best thing about Box Nation, without a shadow of a doubt, is international content. I think they've done a great job, you know, really, really getting hold of the international fights, and it's definitely something I'd like Sky to do more of. Unfortunately, when they do, it's not really getting the numbers either, you know. And I've pushed hard, you know. I've been behind getting the Golovkin fights, and we had a little run of getting a few bits and pieces, but you know, it's just not delivering the numbers at that time in the morning. But it's still in my sights to make sure that I can pick up some content, and we're looking for quite a few bits for 2015. I think that's one thing that Box Nation have done very well, is to pick up the late night stuff. And you know, they've got a really good schedule of that kind of stuff.
Is there any more plans to have any more shows in Wales and Scotland?
Scott Harris and Ricky Burns, is that a reality?
I'd like to. I've no problem making that fight. It's one that's about a lot. You know, Scotland get a lot of stick about Scotland stuff, and it's like, the bottom line is, when you haven't got a bill topper, that Sky are happy to be a bill topper, you can't just go back and put William on and Stephen Simmons, you know? So we've got to build back to something, and Harris and Burns, definitely we could return to Scotland with. You know, again with Wales, if we can bring Gradovic over for a world title fight, you know, if Cleverly beats Bellew and he fights maybe Hernandez or something like that, we can do something in Wales.
Eddie,
something in the North East.
Sorry mate, Eddie, mark my words, Gradovic won't be coming over for that fight, because he'll lose his title. He's fighting, I think, in December against Jason Velez. Velez will beat him.
You think so?
Yep.
I don't agree with you.
Tommy's a big fan of Velez, though.
Velez is my mate.
Yeah. I don't believe he will, but we'll have a cheeky fiver on that.
Alright.
Ed, there's also one cropping up here about your association with StubHub. Can you let us know what the connection is there? Because some people were obviously going on about the tickets from the two Fox Groves fights were ending up on their site.
I'll tell you quite clearly. StubHub, a little bit different to some of these other brands. They have a primary and secondary market. The primary market that they have, which is stated quite clearly on their website, says if they've got their ticket from a performer or if they've got their ticket from a promoter. StubHub sponsored our O2 show because they are an official sponsor of Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua sells his allocated tickets, i.e. his fighter tickets, on StubHub officially. No inflated prices, just at the ticket price. Their secondary market is controlled by a punter, i.e. if you bought a ticket, you can go on a secondary market and you can sell it. They don't sell tickets to the secondary market, the punter does. I have never and will never supply tickets to a secondary market, and I've actually never supplied them to StubHub either. It makes me laugh when people go, they just sold them to a load of touts. We didn't, they just sold out. Now, I can't stop people reselling their tickets, and certainly that's definitely something that people do. You find now, cleverly, the touts are all over. I've been called all the time. How many tickets you got? My mate was... Do you know, if I wanted to, I'd approach you, especially for the Wembley fight, and I won't name the websites, but approach me and said, we will buy X thousand tickets, and we will give you 50% of the upside, i.e., give us a £100 ticket, we'll sell it for £200, we'll give you the £100 and the £50. I could have made hundreds of thousands of pounds doing it. And maybe I should have. But I definitely didn't, and it's something I wouldn't do because I just don't think it's right. And actually, for the bigger shows, you don't need to. They sell out anyway. And these sites, they don't have tickets to like the O2, where you sell 5,000 or 6,000 tickets in an 8,000 or 9,000 capacity. They just want them for the big shows, but the big shows only come around so often. In answer to your question, StubHub sponsored the October the 11th show I go to, their official sponsor of Anthony Joshua, and that's where he sells his tickets on the primary side of StubHub at face value.
Fair enough. Obviously last year was probably the greatest year for boxing internationally, even domestically, for great fights. This year's been, just to be blunt about it, pretty shit. The biggest fight that we're all looking forward to basically is the fight on Saturday, Hopkins-Kovalev. How do you see it going?
I think Kovalev will stop them.
The early, mid, late rounds?
Mid to late stoppage.
Right.
I just think he'll get hold of him. I think he'll be too strong.
What's
That's
the
a very
latest
interesting fight.
What's the
I'm sure
latest
it'll be the greatest fight in the world.
I don't think it will be, no. What's the latest on Froch? Is he going to vacate the IBF? Is it looking very likely he's going to do that, or is it pipe and slipper
Yeah,
thing?
he's got till December 31st trying to make a decision on what he's going to do. He really wants to share this fight. I spoke to Al Hamer Tuesday, and I think everyone seems to want the Froch fight from their side, but they've just got so many issues to sort out on who's the promoter, how many fights are left. It's messy, very messy. But Froch is in no tearing rush.
Eddie, I know. Sorry, I know Chavez. It's in a mess over there with him, but I know you're obviously closer to it than me. But I've said for a while on here that I think Froch would rather retire than fight De Gale, because I think it's probably for less money, and it's a trickier fight as well. And Chavez is, to me, I think Chavez is a straightforward win for Froch and for shed loads of money. So it's quite simple for me.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of money in the De Gale fight, but I think it's not a fight that he's done the Wembley thing. He's done the sort of young Brit. I'm not sure it's a fight that really fits. Yeah, it would be awkward because stylistically it's a tough fight for him. But it's not really about that, and it's not really about the money. He just wants something. But I'll tell you something now, and you'll probably laugh at me, but I'm going to Froch Golovkin in the summer.
Great fight.
Yeah, that's a great fight.
And he's a sick bastard, and he asks a lot of questions about Golovkin. And I would not be surprised if he just turned around to me one day and went, go on then. There has to be a shitload of money in it. By then there might be.
So with a good undercard, you could actually make that one pay-per-view.
Eddie, you happy with that one on pay-per-view?
Yeah.
You can fuck off with an you can fuck off with an undercard because there won't be one.
What about the potential of? Well, my next question is twofold. Kessler rubber match. Where would it happen if it was going to happen? And if not, what about going up to light heavyweight and fighting Stevenson for the lineal title?
No light heavyweight.
Who are you talking about?
Froch. If there's no going to be a rubber match with Kessler.
No. Froch, Froch is 12 stone 6, 7 now, walking around. He'd be at such a disadvantage at light heavyweight. If anything, I think he'd move down.
The thing is, if you look back to the greats as well, Duran weighed 9 stone 9 and went up to super middleweight and beat the likes of Barclay and all the guys. It enhances his legacy even more if he was to go and beat Stevenson for the lineal title. And
I'm not sure that's
he'd win that fight as well.
Stevenson's only recently moved up to light heavyweight from super middleweight, so I think it could be made at a catchweight.
Like a lot of these fights, it's a bit like Golovkin. I'll get slated on Twitter. I say, unfortunately, it's not an HBO pay-per-view fight. What? Of course it is. Just, okay, get on with it and know that, dude. Because if it was HBO pay-per-view and we had 2 bites of the cherry on British and US pay-per-view, Froch would take that fight.
I think Golovkin's building though. I mean, he sold a lot of tickets at the StubHub last time out. He sold out.
You're right, yeah, listen, that's what I said. In the summer,
Has he gone?
He's cut out there now.
That'll do it anyway, fuck it.
Oh, he's still there.
You're cutting out there already.
Hello.
I've got 5% left on my battery. So
right, we've got
to finish with. I want to finish with one question. Then you say that you're a pretty big hardcore fan of the sport and stuff. So what card would you rather pay pay-per-view for? Fury Chisora or your own one that you're putting on? As a fan, if you had no personal investment in either card, what would you pay for?
To be honest with you, and you ain't going to believe me anyway, I would say ours. Let me tell you the reason why. Because on the 29th, there's only really 2 fights that I'm interested in. And that's, it strikes against a Walsh actually happening.
Walsh is miles away from the weight.
Walsh is he's a bit of stonable weight apparently.
But I've heard that fight's not happening. So, anyway, I mean, you don't know whether Saunders Eubank will happen. And actually, you don't even know whether Fury Chisora will happen. Anyway, say they both did. I actually don't think Fury Chisora is that good a fight. I do think Saunders Eubank is a good fight.
That's a fight. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's against Quigg. That's not fun at all. I mean, and it just doesn't, do anything for me. What else is on the bill? Sykes against Walsh, no, that's not happening.
Gavin against Skeet.
And what's the other, what?
Gavin against Skeet.
Is that one?
Thank you,
that does
Gavin.
absolutely nothing for me. I'd much rather watch the Gal Terrapin than, I'd much rather watch Quigg Ataki than Gavin against. So the answer actually is my show.
So the Quigg fight shite then?
Say again?
So you would rather watch Quigg against Otaki rather than Gavin against Skeet, so you're basically saying they're roughly about the same.
100%. Oh, yeah. Frankie Gavin against Daddy Skeet.
Frank said it was a brilliant fight. You don't believe him, Ed?
No. I like Frankie Gavin. I think he's a big young fighter, but
no, that's a bad style.
Bradley Skeet before, and I like Bradley Skeet. And by the way, Bradley Skeet is a lovely fella. But that is an horrible fight.
Yeah, those styles don't mesh.
I actually feel for Gavin because I don't feel like that's the fight that he fought Bundu, saw that fight, and
Eddie wants to sign Frankie.
It was a very close one.
Eddie, just for my ego, was Bundu in the running to fight Kell Brook on December the 6th before the incident?
He was in the running, but it wasn't going to be in.
Right, okay.
Eddie, we're aware we've had you on for about 2 hours just roughly, so...
I was thinking to myself, I was thinking the IBS inflict mandatories like nobody's business. I was thinking Bundu against Dan, perfect. Let the winner of that be the mandatory. We'll have that. And then obviously Heyman signed him. He's now fighting Thurman. But now Ian Jojo Dan, he's fighting Kevin Bizier in a final eliminator. Well, that's perfect as well. We'll have one of them as a mandatory.
I like Jojo Dan. Good wee fighter.
Yeah, so it's a perfect fight for Kell Brook, as is Bizier. By the way, Bundu, Kell Brook would smash Bundu.
Yeah.
And he won't go 4 rounds with Thurman.
No.
Just too old now.
Yeah. This is Ed, I know we've had you on about 2 hours, your battery's just about to die out, so this says thanks for your time, and answer the question.
I love talking boxing, it's good to talk to you.
Well, hopefully we can get you back on again at some point if you're not too bad with the questions we ask and stuff.
Maybe on November the 23rd, eh?
Yeah. Well, who are you sending the 500 quid to?
Let's see how it pans out first. Don't tell me that Nathan Cleverly and Tony Bellew have a head clash in the first round.
Yeah. And all other fights are like first round knockouts, and it's a technical decision in the main event. Then you're going to be running.
You won't be getting there on the 23rd, but again, you did by the sword, you die by the sword. I think it's going to be a great night, and it'll be a great atmosphere. We shall see.
Thank you. Thanks for taking your time.
Thanks, Eddie.
Cheers.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.